Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Melissa, so we've been trying to figure out our brand, like
for weeks, months,
years. Like, what is the self-awareness journey and what are we trying to do? And what is like the category we fit in, right?
Right.
When we talk about marketing, right? When I talk about marketing at work, we're often trying to get our products into the right category so people can understand what they are super fast.
And we can start showing ourselves in those branding areas more so that people that are searching for support can have it.
Yes.
Yes,
right.
I know it.
Right. So
done a beautiful job.
Well, right. Like, what category is the self-awareness journey in? Because like at first we think, well, it's in the mental health space, right?
Yeah.
Certainly that's like a super broad category.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As I think about it a little bit more, then like, well, that's like not quite right because there's parts of that mental health area that like we're far away from. Yeah. You know, like therapy and things like that.
And I think what we've said about that is that's all more of that reactive zone. You know, It's like, I am now this way, and so I need help.
Yep. And there's certainly like a whole science around
Oh, of course.
all that. And there's doctors and there's all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, so then we shift into like mental wellness, right? Like there's like a little softer term for maybe what we're doing.
Well, right? I don't think that that's a term that most people use or are accustomed to, but I think that is a term that you and I always like get really fired up about and want to proliferate.
Yep. So mental wellness. But then I was getting it one step farther. And I really love this next term. It's not quite a category yet.
Oh, no.
I think it's going to be a category though. Mental fitness. It's mental fitness.
Yeah.
Like what we're doing is working on mental fitness. And here's my definition of mental fitness.
Okay.
So mental fitness is having and maintaining a state of well-being and cultivating awareness of how we think, behave, and feel.
Did you write that?
No, I stole that from the internet.
Okay. Wow, that internet is so smart. Can you say that again? Say it again.
Okay. So mental fitness
is
having and maintaining a state of well-being and cultivating awareness of how we think, behave, and feel.
Wow. Actually,
that's what we're doing.
I love that. I know, right? Perfect.
Thank you, internet.
How come you didn't find that like 2 years ago? I should
probably cite whoever wrote that because it's really spot on.
And we should probably give it to our new fabulous PR marketing person. So they have some clue about what we're attempting to do here.
So when we think about mental fitness, like I started trying to draw in a parallel between that and physical fitness, right? And you and I talk about that a lot, and we don't articulate it very well. This idea that if you're working on physical fitness, like tell me, Melissa, like if you're going to go work on physical fitness, like what are you going to do? Tell me like your daily or weekly actions of what you're going to do.
Yeah, for sure. I would be 3 days a week at least, maybe 4 on a good week of doing hot yoga, flow yoga. And then I would maybe be taking a walk on occasion. I would try to focus on not eating so much bread as in an entire loaf in 3 days. Those are the things that I would do, though. I would specifically have go-to items, and those would be them.
Yeah.
How about you?
So,
just curious.
So if I'm working on my physical health, I like do strength training once a week. I'd probably go hit a whole bunch of tennis balls. And I would definitely focus on my diet
Mm-hmm.
and eating way less sugar.
Right. Same
Mostly.
here. I just love sugar so
But
much.
the thing, when we start talking about what are we gonna do for our physical fitness, we all have these lists.
Yes, we do. Yep.
Everyone's got a list, and everyone
Absolutely.
generally knows what to do. Whether we can stick to that or not, which obviously we can't,
or don't want to.
We all know kind of like what to do.
Yeah.
But if I said
do.
well, you're maybe a bit of an outlier in this way because you're kind of like a junkie, but if I say like, hey, what are you doing to work on your mental fitness?
Yeah.
People are just like, what are you talking about? Like, they don't have a go-to routine. They don't know what the things are they should do.
Yeah. Or can do. I mean, I don't even think it's a should conversation. I think it's this is a topic that most people aren't talking about. You know, it's like we don't approach our mind the way we approach our body.
Yeah.
We simply don't. And, you know, if you want to talk about the physical health, you can say, yes, there are many things that people do as a reactive state for physical health. Like, oh, I've had a heart attack, so now I have to eat a low sodium diet and I need to lose 20 pounds. Or, oh, I now have borderline diabetes. I need to do these things. So there are certain reactive things, but with physical health, it is definitely delineated between reactive and proactive states. With mental health, I don't believe our society has ever focused on much the proactive side of mental health and mental fitness. I think we have in the last 10 years started to get more into that. You know, you're starting to see more and more. But it's funny, like there's almost like buzz phrases or buzz industries that are trying to like make that pitch, right? Like the meditation world, that's making that pitch right now. But there's just really not a lot of ways to think about that people have used in the past.
I'd say meditation is a great example. It definitely had a little bit of uprising,
and I think it still does. There's a lot of things that people are
but there's so much beyond meditation, and meditation frankly is really hard for some people. It's like not their thing, right?
But you know what though, like even just stopping on this point for a moment, because I know a bunch of our listeners do meditate, a bunch of our listeners want to, and a bunch of our listeners have probably do what they call, and I'm using air quotes, failed at it, or they quote can't do it. But even in meditation, there are thousands of ways to meditate that are all great and look completely different, you know? So I think even in that, we haven't given that its due attention.
Right. It's kind of like, your go-to is hot yoga. My go-to is strength training.
Yeah.
Right. They're both physical exercise. They're just different.
Yeah.
Same with meditation. There's so many varieties of it that
that's so true.
What works for one doesn't work for the other, or is enjoyable, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. So this idea that we're going to become more proactive with mental fitness is interesting. Like could this be a movement that's coming up?
I would change the question to, how can it not be a movement that's coming up? And here's why. Here's why. You know, startling and awful statistics. We like to always stay positive in our podcast, but teen suicide is on a huge rise. Medications for anxiety and depression are vastly prescribed in shocking numbers. People are, with all the pandemic and everything in the last year and a half, people are calling it the Great Resignation. People are quitting their jobs because they can't manage the anxiety and stress, or they no longer see its value against a paycheck. So I think that there are a number of societal lights turning on that say we must pay attention, and we must pay attention differently.
Yeah.
And so I think there's this huge opportunity right now.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really, really excited about that.
So here's an interesting thing I observed, because when right before you and I hopped on the pod, I was like, making my lists of
of
stuff.
course, yeah. Here I was in my mind. Here I was in my thoughts and feelings. How does that feel? Talk about that. What does that feel like?
We were on Alex Morales' podcast a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And
the Twin City Wellness Collective,
right? And we're talking about wellness. And we didn't talk about it a lot with him, mostly because we were just focused on self-awareness and things like that for the sake of that podcast. But he talks about the 8 pillars of wellness, right? And this is kind of a sort of well-known list from a long time ago. And the pillars are physical, social, emotional, occupational, financial, spiritual, intellectual, and environmental. Right, so that's a big list.
Yeah.
But what's interesting when I glance at this list, so when you look at physical, right? Physical, okay, like there's lots of gyms, sports, activities, diets, cookbooks, like there's so much around that, right?
Yeah.
Social, there's so many clubs and activities and recreation to do, right? All that's built up. Occupational, right? Jobs, coaching, like the whole structure of training at your job. Like there's a lot of support around occupational. Financial, you might have a financial advisor, right? There's resource there. Spiritual, obviously, if you go to church, like church is a huge infrastructure of spiritual support.
Yeah. And many other besides church, many other spiritual opportunities. Yeah.
Intellectual, there's no shortage of schools, right? Or books.
Or teachings.
And then like environmental, right? Again, there's no shortage of houses and apartments and condos and all this infrastructure for that. But the one that seems like kind of like blank to me is emotional. Right? So that's one pillar, emotional. Okay, so where do I go for emotional support? Like what are the tools and resources that are at arm's length to me for this emotional piece? And it's like not until we're broken do we figure out that emotional part.
And then we try to figure it out not as resourced emotionally or mentally as we normally are because we're hurting and we're not our best selves. Right? So then we're searching. Now I'll give you a couple of examples. So I have several 20-somethings in my life, either due to me coaching them in their jobs or through my kids' friends or what have you. But I have had conversations with 4 20-somethings in the last 1 month's period of time that wanted to talk with a therapist. Just normal, common stuff that they're trying to work through, right? And in every single one of those cases that were all unrelated, the fastest one of them could get in was 5 weeks from now. And the others was over 2 months away. So
that's a huge hole.
That's a huge gap, right? So my point to this is, even though we have all of these things, right, that are available to us, or we think they are, or we want them to be, but we don't actually, we have a sort of a stigma about that too, which we could have a whole podcast about, but that's not for today. But we have all these options, but even those options are no longer fitting what's really needed in many, many, many cases. I think we're scrambling as a country, as a society, as a movement, we're scrambling to try to make them fit again. And but there's, that we're in this learning curve and this big gap. So even those things that we've had that were available to us, we either don't know much about, we're scared to engage in because we're embarrassed, especially if you're in your 30s or older. I don't usually like to put things on, label things, but I will in this case because I think millennials and the younger generations have a much healthier view of mental wellness and mental fitness than people like me that are a little older. 30s, 40s, 50s, and older, there is a huge stigma around anything related to your mental fitness because people think it's because you're broken.
Yeah. I will even observe that in my teams with again, I want to put this, like, I don't want to make this too sweepingly general, but like our older managers are way less tolerant of, mental, like we have I have a very clear policy at work that people should take mental health days off.
Yeah.
Just no questions asked, not feeling it, don't come to work.
Yep.
That's it. That's my whole policy. Some of the team really struggles with that because they're like, yeah, JJ, but that's their job and they should, show up.
Suck it up.
Suck it up and get here. And, I'm like, that's just not how we're going to run it here.
Yeah.
So, it's like they do that. They do it, right? But they're clearly not like real happy about it.
Yeah. But I think that's the whole point of this conversation. It's like, so even the resources that are currently available, we have ideas about, we have preconceived notions about, and it does usually represent, I think part of it is because it represents us being not very happy or at a time in our lives when we aren't our best. So we don't like to think about it or work on it. And yet the way that you and I are talking about this, it's a hugely different opportunity, right? It's a proactive, really amazingly wonderful opportunity to develop something within you.
Yeah.
That's not your physical body or what have you, but it's a huge, wonderful place.
Yeah. You know what one of the problems to me is when I look at this list, the problem is vulnerability, right? Because if you look at physical, social, occupational, financial, spiritual, intellectual, like all this whole list, it's so easy, well, even emotional, but like it's so easy to hide different things. Like, I mean, even just like the stigma we have, especially in the US, around even like talking about money and salary.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So like, it's interesting that so many of these pillars of wellness, we also have really great ways of hiding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can kind of hide, like if you're the intellectual one, right? You can kind of like fake your way through a lot of stuff. Occupational one, financial one. I mean, you kind of hide in these things. I think it's scary when, like the emotional one starts coming out, right? Like you can't hide very well. I mean, you can hide for a while, but as soon as you start talking about it, it becomes unhidden pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Is that tracking? Like,
yeah, no, it is. I was just reflecting on many of my coaching relationships will begin in a place of very closed, a rigidity around self and self-expectation about how to behave, how to think, and what to feel. That's usually where we start. And then I was reflecting on this amazing conversation I had with one of my clients this week. And she was saying the old me would have gotten very angry at that state. The old me would have had, and these are literally words she said, the old me would have had a lot less tolerance for my employee who just lost a spouse. Because it's been a long time and, there's stuff that has to be done, which is still all true. But the old me would react so differently than the me today, which has much more awareness and is much more willing to be vulnerable. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
So we talked a lot about, or we talked about some things we can do in this mental fitness category. But what tools, like what things can we do to just take some initial steps?
Right. Yeah. So the very first thing that I would say is we have to work on being okay with not doing 24 hours a day. We have to learn strategies to be okay with being gentler and softer with ourselves, because when we do that, we're able to grow, we're able to develop, we're happier, right? So it's all of those things. So there's many ways, and different personalities are going to enter into it. And getting to the question that you asked, of course, I never answer anything with 2 words like succinctly. But I think it really is depending on who you are as a person and what is easiest for you. So I would say you want to pick tools and ideas that are the absolute easiest for you to enter into without it seeming like you're doing this vast, personality or character change, because that doesn't happen, right? So like, even like, for example, I'm just going to go back to the meditation piece. If someone wants to learn to meditate, like let's say that's something that they aspire to and they've tried it, it doesn't work, and they've told themselves they can't do it, they're failures or whatever. There is a thing called walking meditation where you simply walk quietly with your eyes open, and you just try to keep your head focused on each step your foot takes on the ground. That is also a meditation. There's a million different kinds of meditation: guided, with music, sitting, eyes closed, eyes open, walking, doing things, there's just a million. So finding, not being so quick to judge what options are available to you. And I'm using meditation only as one example, right? There's a lot of different personal development courses and personal development opportunities for people. Obviously, the self-awareness journey is one, but there's many, many that help you recognize your emotional parts, not your brain parts, but your emotional parts, exploring things that you would normally shy away from because you think that it's silly or unnecessary. It's a lot of it is working on setting down the judgment.
Yeah. The one thing that I also think about is, we talk about is like mind-body connection, right? We talk a lot about like how you're gonna like your body will know something sort of before your head does. And I really think in mental fitness there is a strong correlation between that and physical fitness. And I'm not saying like everyone's got to go like be super workout and
no, like, because they're not going to,
whatever. But I believe that there's such a connection between physical and mental fitness that, like, at work we have a 30-minute a day policy where I expect people to get up out of their chairs and they can go work out hard if they want, or just go take a walk during the day for 30 minutes, because like really there is a big connection between your body and your brain. And
well, your energy sits in all different places. Energy sits in your body, and mental energy collects in your body. I think that's a different way that I would say that. And regardless if you're buff, fit, or whether you're just moving your body, it doesn't matter if you're 105 years old or if you're 8 years old. Energy sits in the body. Energy is always with us, and it collects and it shifts and it moves around. And I think what you're saying is to have that awareness and to allow it to move.
And like walking meditation is a perfect hybrid of like,
all the
things I think are important.
I know it's funny that we're talking about walking meditation because we didn't really have any agenda with that whatsoever, but it really is a really super easy entry point for people. And I just think, I think what I want to make sure that we're talking about today is the value of proactive mental support. Self-awareness about mental growth, mental fitness, mental wellness, not mental health as a reactive state. Yes, of course, that is vitally important, but the value of getting out ahead of it, the value of exploring ourselves, the value of realizing how deep our waters actually run, and what's available to us, and how much we can self-soothe and how much we can bring ourselves back to center before we reach that extended state of needing mental health crises intervention of some sort.
Right. It's always better for your car to like do routine oil changes instead of waiting for the engine to seize up.
Or the light to stay on for 2,032 miles. Don't ask me how I know that. Yeah, it's all true.
Well, I like this. I hope that that the idea of mental fitness keeps growing. Obviously, you and I are going to keep beating on that drum because
we sure are. We sure are.
It's really important, this idea that becoming more proactive, working on this as a daily, weekly practice, just like you would mental fitness is where we want to be.
And love yourself up as a result of it. Don't judge yourself for wanting to explore it. It doesn't make anybody weak or anything like that. I mean, it is the most courageous of persons that can be vulnerable. And I just think it's a huge opportunity for all of us. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.